I will yield to Senator Johnson and note that I do not believe I badgered any witness.
I appreciate that. Here's one proposed solution, by the way, if we want to decrease the stress level on our children. It'd be nice if climate change alarmists would stop scaring the you-know-what out of our children by telling them that the world is going to end in a dozen years, okay? It's not. But let's talk about some realities. Does anybody here expect either India or China to quit trying to bring their people out of poverty and stop using fossil fuels? And anybody here think that's going to happen? Does anybody dispute that by their own models, if we were to eliminate all CO2 in America, it would have a negligible impact on global temperatures? Anybody want to dispute that one? Can somebody explain to me, I look at just some basic facts. Again, I don't deny climate change, I'm just not an alarmist. I look at the Vostok ice core sample, and I see we're in the 5th cycle now. Very, very consistent, 22.7 degree temperature variations over the span of 440,000 years. The Greenland ice core sample, the number of them, about 6.7 degrees over the last 10 to 20,000 years since the last glaciation period. This is the one that always shocks audience. It shocked me because we're always concerned about sea level rise, right? The increase in the sea level in the Bay of San Francisco since that last glaciation period, 390 feet. So any of our witnesses think that there's anything mankind could do or could have done to hold back the tides? The answer is no, there's nothing we could have done. So again, like Bjorn Lomborg talks about, is we have limited resources. Dr. Schramm talked about we've been very effective at reducing some of these noxious pollutants that obviously impact health. Spend money on that. Spend money on cheaper energy, nuclear, right? I totally agree. But the environmental left generally has shut down nuclear plants. So if you're really concerned about CO2, and I'm not, I think it's a plant food, we'll adapt, but there's far better ways of spending money. Mr. Schellenberg, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the nuclear issue just shows that maybe the people that are raising the alarm about this, there's an ulterior motive going on here. Something else is going on. I mean, we've got some big problems with renewables that we need to deal with. I mean, we have Steve Hayes from NOAA, who is top scientist at NOAA, that said that you can't have any more industrialization of the eastern seaboard without threatening the extinction of the North Atlantic right whale. It's extremely troubling. We're seeing a high number of dolphin and whale strandings, beachings since industrial wind activity occurred. So, I know that many people here support nuclear power, but we still don't have a plan to expand it. And that's the easiest and fastest way to transition away from fossil fuels without increasing electricity prices.
What big wind towers are ever repaired and put back in service? And what is the life of one of these wind towers? And how much copper goes into them? And what do we do with them? Again, we were just ignoring. There was a really good hearing. I saw a clip of it talking about these large trucks need 2 batteries, each weigh 8,000 pounds.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about the externalities of fossil fuels, but what about the externalities of renewables? It's not like you can put solar panels on the compost bin and hope that they'll, decompose. There is no end of use for solar panels. Europeans dump them on African nations. For ours, go to landfills. Same thing with used wind turbine blades. It's because it's not cost effective to recycle them. So you have a huge waste problem from these solar panel and wind turbines and batteries that nobody's talking about.
So Dr. Greenstone, that would be a really good analysis for your research is, take a look at the externalities and the cost of all this green energy, what's being proposed. Have you looked at that?
It's an excellent question. And I think one thing that I'm a little confused about the exchange with Mr. Schellenberger here is the planet doesn't care if we run solar, if we run wind, or nuclear for that matter. The planet only cares about CO2. So I think that's why many people interested in climate, certainly including myself, advocate for a market-based solution that penalizes the release of CO2 that is causing damages. So I find the debate about particular technologies a little confusing. And then I just want to add one point that where I feel like there should be some agreement with Mr. Schellenberger and I, but I'm a little perplexed by it. He seems to be a big proponent of nuclear and was engaged in a kind of heated exchange with Senator Whitehouse. Well, if solar and wind are so great, the market would just adopt them. Well, the same challenge applies to the advocacy of nuclear. Nuclear plants aren't running, they're not being built because they're out of the money. The reason they're out of the money is they cost more than fossil fuels, and so fossil fuels have this kind of free subsidy. So I just come back to, we should aim for a level playing field that does not treat any technology better than the other, and stay focused on what the planet cares about, and that's CO2. It's not a particular technology.
Well, nuclear, we kind of regulated up the cost of that. Was Ms. Schellenberg, I think you should be able to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the planet does care. If you use 300 to 800 times more land for producing energy from solar and wind than you do out of nuclear, the planet does care. The North Atlantic right whales do care about that. If you produce solar panels in China with coal, those are high carbon intensive solar panels, in contrast if you made them in a place, and you made them in France, which is mostly nuclear. So of course it matters. So and as nuclear, as you mentioned, I mean, California was shutting down a nuclear plant not because it was expensive, but because of anti-nuclear phobias that date back to the 60s. So nuclear is fundamentally just an issue of public concern. We overregulated it. The people that pushed for that overregulation were pushing for it because they were ostensibly scared of it, but they really favored renewables. There's a whole regulatory paradigm here that has to be taken into consideration.
And what about the economic or the environmental impact of mining?
Massive. I mean, that's why you look at what's happening in the Congo. I mean, just go online and look at cobalt mining in the Congo. It's a shame. What's happening in China, it's an absolute travesty. We should not be importing any more solar panels or batteries produced in China to the United States. It's just a fundamental human rights issue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.